was on a planning meeting for a teach-in that my husband and I are moderating for our church's Board of Social Action yesterday when someone asked the icebreaker centering question, where were you when you heard that Biden was the projected winner of the 2020 presidential election? Now, it would have been weird that such a question would be asked about a pretty typical presidential election, were it not for the fact that for a lot of reasons, this election wasn't typical. But Saturday morning, my hubby and I, Abda Shahid, that's my husband, and I went up to Malcolm X Park here in Washington, D.C., and we participated in a rally that focused on the continued struggle to build Black power, ending colonialism and demanding reparations for Africans in the U.S. and connecting our struggle with all oppressed people around the world. And we were there lifting up the demand to shut down AFRICOM and to end the war on Black people at home and abroad. And we were vibing to some really wonderful revolutionary reggae music, which I admit that I really love, in between speakers when all of a sudden we heard car horns honking and people shouting on the street below the park. The ladies doing yoga at the other end of the park fell out of their downward dogs and started jumping for joy and hugging each other. Joggers stopped, checking their phones and lifting their hands in jubilation. And we knew what it was, but I checked my phone just to be sure. And sure enough, the presidential race had been called for Joseph R. Biden as the prospective winner. The Electoral College numbers from Pennsylvania were enough to push Biden past the 270 mark, and having lost that state, Trump practically had no path to catching up and overtaking him. Now, of course, ballots continue to be counted in other states for an official end to the election so that the results can be certified, and a recount will actually occur in at least one state, Georgia, because the percentage difference between the ballots for the two candidates is only 0.5%, 0.5%. But for all intents and purposes, Biden has emerged as having received the most electoral college votes to win the presidency. But an interesting thing happened as the morning wore on and celebrations broke out on the streets, around the park, and among people inside the park, as we continued our rally, pointing out that for us and other oppressed people in the U.S. and around the world, Biden's victory wasn't won because the system he is now the figurehead of remains the same, and he is not going to change it. People around us celebrating pretty much ignored us as if we weren't even there. And isn't that exactly what it's been like being a Black leftist or Marxist or socialist or communist or revolutionary or radical in this liberal town of Washington, D.C., and definitely in this overall moderately conservative country, and that's being generous at best all the time? As I was talking about that moment to the people on the church meeting, I noted how the people in the park, taking advantage of the beautiful and unseasonably warm November day, were already ignoring us, despite the big signs and the speakers outlining the need to dismantle the police state, the neoliberal economic order, and to end the fascist suppression of political dissent on social media and in what's left of journalism, and the need for Black people to not just fight for Black lives, but to fight for Black power. This just became more pronounced as people continued to ignore the discussion about the ongoing struggle against these issues that need to continue under Biden because they were celebrating that Trump was gone. And that seemed to be enough for them to rejoice as if they'd won something. The fact that so many people believe they can now breathe a collective sigh of relief that the cartoon villain, Donald Trump, has been evicted means to me that Trump represented white America's fear of their government, which is something I don't think most white people have ever really experienced in this country, regardless of the cries of a tyrannical government that you hear from the right. Now, before Trump, the government wasn't really seen as posing a threat to most white people in this country since maybe the Civil War. But their joy at the election of allegedly decent and sometimes composed Joseph Biden represents those same people knowing very little about neoliberalism, colonialism, imperialism, and the non-Nazi like fascism that this government has always been involved in, that Biden certainly won't address, that actually does affect them, but that they don't care to know about. But as almost everyone in the park ignored us as they celebrated the changing of the guard of the empire, I knew that we were going to continue to not get much help from most folks in this struggle. Now, I don't want to be completely downtrodden about this whole election thing, because I know people are real happy. So I feel like I have to recognize that there will be some good things that will come out of the Biden-Harris administration. I think they will try to return the U.S. to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal, and to the Paris Climate Accords. I think they'll roll back Trump's environmental and anti-LGBTQ executive orders, and I think they will return the U.S. to the Obama-era posture with Cuba, maybe. Make no mistake, these are good things, and on some level, that they're important things. Although, if I were Iran, I'd put some stipulations on the U.S. returning to the agreement, and the Paris Climate Accords will not save us from climate change that is already underway. But they'll also not change the nature of U.S. imperialism. So without a complete dismantling of the U.S. imperialist agenda and its capitalist underpinnings, these few efforts, while they will make people feel really good when they're done, will not end the oppression that the U.S. is responsible for in so many ways around the world. So much more must be done, but they won't be if people won't even acknowledge that more must be done and learn and understand what that more is. And as I saw people ignore us in the park Saturday morning, and as I'm seeing people silence us radicals as we are warning that the agenda and strategy needs to be set now for what people mean when they say they intend to push Biden and Harris to the left, I know where this is going. Me and Sean and folks like us will continue to organize like we've always been. I'll keep on organizing teach-ins at my church like the one we're doing this weekend on defunding the police, and we'll keep participating in demonstrations and conferences and speaking to whomever will listen about these ongoing struggles, and people who believe that a Biden win returns them to a life of normalcy will go on about their business, ignoring us, believing that they no longer have to be afraid of their own government. And sadly, I think that is over half the country. Meanwhile, those of us who've always known better will continue to fight to dismantle the systems that these people don't even realize are still very much working to crush us all. Follow Luqman Nation on patreon.com/Luqman Nation for lots of great content.